Praise be to you, O Christ. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. This week, being the weeks during Eastertide, we are doing various stories of the resurrection. Yesterday, we talked about Jesus' resurrection appearance at the Sea of Tiberias, which is among one of my favorites. Today, we have another account of the resurrection, this one from St. John's Gospel. And of course, in all the stories, it's Mary Magdalene who's one of the first witnesses to the resurrection because of the custom of the time that women prepared the bodies. And we do know that Jesus' body was very hastily prepared on that Friday night because of the Sabbath day. You don't touch your body on the Sabbath day. So as the sun was going down, they had to rush and hurry up. So of course, Mary, having her responsibilities as a member of that society, was going back to the tomb to do a proper job of anointing that body and preparing it for burial. Much to her surprise, of course, Jesus is not there, and we hear the story of the angels and Jesus himself. What always strikes me about this particular resurrection appearance, like all the rest, they don't recognize Jesus at first, but what strikes me is how Mary realizes it's Jesus. He says her name. Now, I've had somebody say that perhaps it's just that she recognized his voice. And that might be true. I mean, it's a dim in the cave, and you know, the last thing you expect is for the body to be missing. She's sure that they've stolen him, and I'm sure she's dazzled. You know, you still see angels every day. She's probably pretty dazzled over that, combined with the whole grief of what happened on Friday. So it may have been that her eyes failed her, but her ears. But I think something even more important is happening. And that is not just that she recognized his voice, but he was saying something that was so important to her, and that's her own name. I mean, think about it. I've been to some sales seminars before I was ordained. You know, I went to some of these sales seminars. And one of the things they talk about is that when you are making a sale, what you want to do is get the name of the person and use their name frequently in the conversation. Because there's nothing a person likes to hear more than their own name. And of course we know throughout scriptures that there are all sorts of times when God does something important and changes the name, both of a place and of an individual. So you have Paul, who was originally Saul, and Simon becomes Peter or Cephas, the rock. So names are very important. But I think primarily through all of that, what I imagine that Mary heard was not only her name, but all the force of the love that was behind it. I mean, it wasn't just like Jesus said, "Hey, Mary, come here. And I got a surprise for you. Ta-da! I'm risen," right? He looked at her and could see in that moment's notice all of her pain and all of her anxiety and all of her fear. Now, we don't have these words recorded in this particular gospel lesson, but in the other gospels, what's one of the first words that Jesus says to the disciples when he sees them? Peace. Peace, and be not afraid, right? He knows that this resurrection is bringing anxiety. But in this case, he turns to Mary, and with all the force of the love that is his very nature, he says her name. Mary. You know, he just, wow. And that's when her eyes really opened and she realized who he was. Well, the good news is God's doing the same thing with all of us today. That Jesus is calling us all by name. That he reaches out and he says, Jose, or Michael, or Doreen, or Steve. Right? God is doing exactly that. And even though we may be caught up in all the chaos and craziness of the world, and confused and mourning and not sure what's supposed to happen next, in all of that, if we are listening, if we are engaged in an active life of prayer, reading the scriptures, receiving the sacraments, and listening to God, we will hear him say the most wonderful word in the world, and that's our very name. Because he's calling us all individually to come and follow him. That's why I like today's gospel lesson. It's just, wow. All the wow of the resurrection appearance, but that the most important thing he said that day was her name. Right? He then gives her marching orders. go out and tell the disciples, you've seen him risen from the dead, and we know the rest of the story, Peter running back, and John, all of this. Great. But today, we get to look at that one important fact, that Jesus loves us so much that he's calling us. Let us, in our lives, respond to that call. Be listening for it and respond. And then in our lives, our words, and in our actions, let us go. Let us hustle. Let us go and proclaim that Jesus Christ is risen from the dead. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. In the day of your festival, said the Lord, I will bring you into a land flowing with milk and honey. Alleluia.